So I rounded up all the scrap wood here from my pile. I got some nice pieces of ash, got some black walnut, got a nice piece of cherry that I'm going to put in the middle, I think. So we're going to go ahead and get these squared up so we can glue them together. Alright, so now we got this left edge jointed on every piece, so we have a nice flat reference to go through the planer. After you go through the planer, both glue surfaces are going to be nice and smooth and almost perfectly straight. So when we clamp them up, we'll get a really nice bond. Everything will be forced straight and it will stay that way if we use enough glue. So I got one of these strips of ash is actually a little too wide. The rest of the pieces you saw are about the same width, so I'm just gonna use this one to space my table saw blade from my fence and then knock this one down to the same size real quick, and then I'll run that through the planer on both sides just to get it nice and smooth with the glue up. Let's get our clamps. I use parallel bar clamps. They're really good about just getting a solid glue up and knowing that everything's getting pulled together. They also provide you sort of a platform to suspend your piece while it's gluing up and add more clamps easily. I'll throw a link to these in the description just in case you guys are looking for them. Alright, so now we're going to flip these up on edge, get some glue on there, and then do the glue up. We'll go ahead and leave this for, well, an hour probably before you run it through the planer. But ideally overnight. And if you're drying in colder conditions, like you're out in a garage like I am, yeah, you probably want to go toward the overnight. Using Tight Bond 2 as usual. Alright, so how much glue do you use? Basically, you want some good squeeze out, but you don't want things to be too messy. For the most part, I hit about the amount that I usually like to go for. There's a little much right there. But over here, like a thin line pushing out like that all the way down, that's a really good indication that you got solid glue and enough of it all the way down the piece. So for the clamps here, I got these beefy clamps we already talked about. These things are amazing, I think essential for doing cutting boards in a productive way. And then I like these other Jorgensens here, or Jorgensens, I don't know how to say it, I'll figure that out. Yeah, you could throw more clamps on, but honestly, these are so beefy that I really don't need more. Yeah, so just make sure there's no obvious cupping or warping going on with how all these pieces are lined up down here. Alright, so we're just going to take this thing out of the clamps now. Looks like it glued up pretty well. It's been probably 36 hours since I put it in there, so it got even longer than 24, but it's out in my garage where it's cold, so that's good. You can see that the underside got a lot more flush together. You can see that the underside there got a lot more level because the clamps kind of help do that. Like they line up nicely together with one another, so they provide you like a flat surface. Alright, so this is what we've ended up with. Nice and smooth on both sides. Very, very straight. So now we're going to trim this up on the table saw. I could probably try to get a bigger board and a smaller board out of this, but I'm going to stick to one bigger board. Hard to see, but yeah, I got a little tiny bit of a gap on one end right here, but it's kind of where I'm going to cut off anyway. And on the other side of the piece, look, I have this low spot, and I didn't want to keep planing it just for that spot, so I've made the decision I'm just going to cut here. So the safest way to do this is to use a crosscut slide on the table saw, or if you have a sliding miter saw. I do not. You can see mine lurking in the background there. Super basic. Yeah, you're going to want to use a crosscut slide on the table saw, and I'll show you my homemade rig. I don't have a video on how to make one because mine is super basic. I'm due for a table saw upgrade, so I haven't put a whole lot of time into attachments and personalizing my table saw. I just didn't think it was worth it, but here we go. So now we got most of a cutting board. Just got to put some finishing touches on and get some finish on there. Now I will show you guys what I like to do for my signature trim on these. We're going to sand it up to, we'll sand it at 120 first. We'll do like some of the rougher sanding first, and then I'm going to run it through the router and I'll show you the trim bit that I really like to use on these. And then we'll do the final sanding and finish. So I'm gonna be hitting this. I think I'm gonna hit it quickly again with 120, and then I'll go up to 180, 220, and 400. Gonna soak this board, not soak, we're gonna wet it in a way that it's thoroughly wet, but it's gonna dry in a reasonable amount of time. And then after that, we're gonna let it dry and sand it again from 220 and 400, and then it's ready for finish. So if you do that, after the first time you wash this board with water, it will still be super smooth afterward instead of getting immediately rough. So if you've ever made a board, you go to wash it once and it's all rough after, that's why. You gotta raise the grain, sand it up again a little bit, and then finish it. Okay, you could leave it there. You could be done. Or you could apply one last bit of finish in the form of wax. And what that's going to do, you got to let this dry out first, but what that's going to do if you add the wax is it's going to repel water better than it normally would. So basically this board is going to look finished longer with use. It's going to retain that wet wood finished look to it, you know. A cutting board without the wax is going to dry out faster. This is based on personal experience too. I've built them several different ways, finished them several different ways. That's one thing I've always noticed is if I take the time to wax the board, it definitely lasts longer, holds up better. You need to refinish it less often. So we'll go ahead and let that dry. We'll slap that wax on there. here we go. Secret to getting your cutting board to last longer and need to apply finish to it less often. Use this stuff. It's food grade wax. I'll throw a link to it in the description. Super useful stuff, not that expensive, really easy to apply. When you do apply it, go heavy. Wipe off the excess, but try to work as much as you can in there. So you're gonna apply it in excess, kind of smear it around, and then buff it in. You can do that for 1 or 2 coats, but 1 coat makes a huge difference. Oh, I just brushed up on the label on this to make sure I was doing it right. I remember this manufacturer says to let it sit for 1 hour and then come and buff it. I don't think you need the full hour personally. If you go heavy like I just did, maybe give it the full hour. What you're letting it do is tack up a little bit, and then you're gonna come in and you're gonna buff it really hard to make like a polished surface with a nice layer of wax on it that'll repel water. So we'll let this sit for a bit and we'll come back to it. All right, here we are about an hour later. You can see we've got a good amount of wax on there. Some of it got absorbed already, but we got streaks that we got to buff in. All right, take something relatively lint-free. I'm just going to use the same rag that I applied that oil finish with earlier. Use a dry section and use circular motions. You're trying to create a little bit of friction. Like imagine taking glue off your hands when you're a kid, or an adult that uses glue, I guess. You're kind of doing that, like you're tempering it into an even surface. You don't have to go too nuts though. So you're going to want to let that cure for about 24 hours before actually using it. That's going to let that wax further set into an actual physical shield, solid shield maybe, rather than kind of a liquid finish like it is now. If you were to cut on it earlier than that, you'd be fine. It's just you might notice a little goopiness to the wax. And if that persists, just buff it in again with a nice clean rag or a paper towel or something. Don't buff too hard with the paper towel, or you might get little shreds of paper towel on your workpiece, and that could be annoying. But yeah, this thing is super smooth. Should hold up pretty well as I wash it a couple times. Hand wash, of course, no dishwasher. Want to avoid super hot water as well, because that'll dissolve glue bonds. But if we treat this thing right, this could be an heirloom board that you pass down, you know. I made it nice and thick too, so it should not warp very easily, and it should be refinishable time and time again because we left enough meat on it, you know. Well, thanks for joining us. Yeah, man, go ahead, toss me a like and a subscribe if you learned anything or you want to watch me grow as a channel. Peace.